Hello Stampers, my name is Linda Bedinger, people call me Linda B, and I'd like to show you today how I made this card. This card was made for a friend who wanted some blank note cards, so you'll notice there's no sentiment on this card. I think one could pretty easily be added right in this space here. A thank you, thinking of you, for you, happy birthday, whatever. But I made it up as a note card, and so that's how I'm going to run the video tutorial today. So I'm going to set this aside, and what we need to make this card is we need a piece of Whisper White that measures 8.5 by 5.5, scored and folded at 4 1/4. Then we need a piece of Old Olive, which measures 5 3/8 by 4 1/8, and you can see I've already adhered that to the front of my card base. Then we'll need 2 pieces of Whisper White. The first piece is 3 3/4 by 4 3/4, and then another smaller piece of Whisper White that measures 4 3/4 by 2 1/2. Then we'll need a little piece of scrap. That is, I use Daffodil Delight, and the stamp set I'll be using today is from the catalog on page 46. It is the First Sight stamp set, and I'll be using this flourish here and this small little fern-like piece here. The other things that we'll be using today are on page 194 of the catalog. I'm using the Swirly Thinlits dies, I'm using the Flourish Thinlit dies, and I'm using the Botanical Builder Framelits. And those, again, 194 in the catalog. Then I'll be using the Grateful Bunch Punch, and we're going to use this little flower right here in the center to make a center for our flowers. So, once you cut these pieces, the Old Olive piece can be adhered to the front of the card and then just set aside. Where we're going to spend all of our time on this particular piece, for the most part, we're going to start with this smaller piece that's 4 3/4 by 2 1/2, and I'm going to bring a little piece of scrap here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use Pear Pizzazz ink, and we're going to make our own little DSP here. So I'll open that up, and I've already mounted the 2 stamps that we talked about earlier. There's the larger flourish and the little fern-like piece. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ink up my stamp, and I'm never going to put this stamp completely down on this piece of paper. I'm going to catch the edges with this around in different spots on the card. Here, a piece there, and maybe a piece there. And then what I'm going to do is use this smaller fern piece, ink that up, and kind of fill up the spaces that remain on the card. There's a lot going on in this card, and I want this particular piece to be pretty full from a stamped standpoint. In order to hold its own against all of the other decoration, I think it needs to be stamped pretty completely. All right, there we go. I think that'll work. And so that is pretty much all the stamping, well, not all the stamping, but close to the stamping that we'll be doing. So the next thing we're going to do is adhere that piece onto this other piece of Whisper White, kind of centered here on this piece of paper. So again, I'm going to use Tombow to adhere this piece in place. And then we'll go on with embellishing this. But I'm going to try and set that down and get it centered. I'm eyeballing it. You could measure, of course, to get it so that there's the same amount of gap at the top and the bottom of this card, and that it's fairly centered. There we go. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is, I don't know if you can see it on this piece, there's a little bit of scoring on this piece here, and I think it just adds such a nice, elegant touch. And what I'm going to do is bring up my scoreboard here, and I'm going to randomly place this card so that I can pick a channel that is just outside the top piece of paper here, and I'm just going to put a little notch in there, and I'm going to do the same thing on this side and put a notch. Now I'm going to turn this over because I'd like my scoring to have the mountainside out on this side of the page. So I'm going to turn this over, and I'm going to line that up with a score line using the small end of my stylus here, and I'm going to score down the paper. Then I'm going to select the very next channel over and score down again. Now I'm going to do exactly the same thing on the other side here. Just line this little notch up with a channel and score down, and then select the very next channel and score down again. And you see the effect that we get on the other side of the paper. I think it just adds a little something to the project, and I like the little touches. So I think it just makes it a little bit more elegant. Let me move that out of the way. Now the next thing we're going to do is to start adding the decorative pieces onto the front of this piece, and then we'll pop this up on dimensionals when we mount it to the card. So what I'm doing is showing you exactly how I set up my big shot to cut out all of the pieces that we need for this card. So we have, this is the new base plate, the Big Shot platform. Then there is the thin die adapter. Then there is the precision base plate, and the precision base plate goes down so that the metal side is up. Then we'll have the paper that I'm going to cut on here, face down on my platform, so that we have this. Then I'll be adding the dies that go across this, and I'll put the sandwich, this metal lucite cutting plate on the top, and I'll run that through the Big Shot. And I've already done that, and here is the piece. This is what you get when you do that. This is the from the Swirly Scribbles die. This is the lattice that's going to form this piece here. Then we have, let me grab those pieces. Then we have the pieces. This has already started to come off, but the leaf, the little leaf with a flower, and this thing, I'm not even sure what we should call it, sort of a bud stem, if you will. And then we also have the white flowers. So these came out of the Flourishing Thinlits, and then we have the two white botanical flowers here to add to our card. And when these come out of the Big Shot, this is my foam sheet and my brush to get the dies out, and this is a great tool. It absolutely loosens everything so that it makes removal of the excess paper just as easy as it can be. And there's all those excess pieces. Now on the die itself, you can see that the pieces are starting to come loose, and it just pops it right out. So if you've been there like I have for years, poking holes to try and get your dies released, this brush and foam sheet are just wonderful. All right, we're going to do the same thing here. I have my leaf, so I'm going to run my brush across my leaf, and that should release everything on this side. I'll have a few little things to poke out, but it does a really good job of getting most of that stuff out. So I'll set these aside. Then we have this little flower piece, and again, you run your brush across it, and chances are you'll just be able to pull it out and it will be free of all the little pieces. And finally, this last little piece in the old olive, and you can see it doesn't take much for that to start loosening and coming off of the die. So there we have all of those pieces. And then I have the flowers. I have the 2 white flowers that we need to get released from the dies as well. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Just release those flowers with a brush, and sure enough, the pieces start to come out. Now that's going to need just a little coaxing, so I'm going to poke out there. And these little pieces, particularly at the base of these, are very, very tiny, so best not to pull on those, but to maybe release them. And all it takes is getting 1 or 2 of them released, and the rest of the flower just pulls out of the die. Same thing with the smallest flower. Again, run my brush over it and see what happens on the other side here. I can see where it's released, and there we go. There we have. So we have our 2 flowers, and we have our leaves that we're going to be using, and we have our lattice. So the last piece that we need, I'll move these here, move this out of the way, is that we need the little yellow inside of this flower. So what I'm going to use is our Grateful Bunch Punch, and I'm going to use this little flower right here on the end, and I'm going to put a piece of paper, this is the Daffodil Delight, in here so that I can see that all of the petals are covered there, and then push that down and get out my little flower. So there we have all of the pieces that we need to put our card together. So what we're going to do is go back to this piece. And the only thing I really didn't talk about before was the cord. On this one, I think you can see that I used this cord around here to add a little detail to the card, and I think it adds quite a bit. And this is a retired piece from Stampin' Up, but they do have that metallic silver thread that's available in the catalog, and that could easily be substituted for this piece. So first thing I'm going to do is adhere let me get all of this mess off of there. I'm going to adhere the lattice piece, and when you run something through your Big Shot on these dies, there's a back side and a front side, and the way it cuts is it puts a very nice finished edge that kind of goes over the paper on the side that I call the good side. On the back side, it's a little flatter, and what we're going to do is I'm going to use some Tombow here, and I'm just going to dot a little bit of glue on the back of this, these little strips on this lattice are actually pretty wide, and it's pretty easy to get a little dot of Tombow. You sure could use your thin fine point tip pen, but my Tombow's right here, so I'm just going to go ahead and use it. And so I'm going to dot along the edge of this, and again I'm using my silicone mat, so if I get glue down it's not going to get in the way of anything else I'm doing here. It won't get on my work surface. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over, put this down, and I'm going to place this. You'll notice the lattice is quite a bit larger than the card, and that's fine. I'm going to put this in place right down here along the bottom edge, and then I will use the my paper snips and go along, turn this over, and go along and cut those edges off. That way you're assured of an absolute perfect fit to your card base. There we go. So there I have those pieces now adhered, the lattice adhered to the card. And now we're going to add the flowers and the additional information pieces here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put down a couple of dimensionals right next to each other on the top of that swirl and remove those backings. And then I'm going to take this cord and I'm just going to release a little bit of it here. And what I'm going to do is wrap that around my fingers, you know, 4 or 5 times, just enough so I get a little bit of it there, and cut off that piece. And I'm going to take this piece and kind of fold it over on itself, and then I'm going to pull some of those pieces up taller and some shorter until it's kind of a mess. It doesn't look like much now, but it'll look fine when we get it on the card. So I'm going to press it into place on the top of one of these dimensionals here. Okay, so there we have that there. Now I have an end here that's got a tail on it, and I'm going to snip that off so that doesn't show outside of the decoration on our card. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the white flower that we cut, and I'm going to use my bone folder and turn that over and just gently lift those petals a little bit. Again, you want to be very careful with this because the necks on these little inner petals are very, very thin, and if you get too aggressive you'll just pull it right out. So that flower now has a little bit of dimension. I'm going to go in and lift these inner petals a bit here, and I am going to add, in addition to the other dimensional that's down, I'm going to add a glue dot to the back of this. Just pick it up on my flower, and that'll help it stick in place. And then I'm going to push that down on that dimensional, and between that and the glue dot my flower's on there pretty firmly. Okay, next I'm going to take this second flower and do the same thing. I'm going to just curl those edges up a little bit to give it a little dimension, and then I'm going to lift those inner flowers, inner petals, and I am going to, in this case, use another glue dot. Pick that right up off of your roll with the center of the flower and put it in place on my flowers here, kind of trying to get it in between some of the other petals so that it has a little bit of a dimension to it. The last piece for the flower is to take this little piece that we just punched out and put that using my piercing tool here to give that a little dimension. And then I'm going to take another glue dot with that and put that right in the center of our flower. All right, that's coming together. So there we have all of those pieces. And now what we have are the little leaves that we cut out from the Flourishing Phrases, I believe it was. And I'm going to knock out these last couple little pieces that didn't come out with the die brush. And with this piece, I'm going to snip off a little bit of this stem here, and I'm going to just put a little dot or so of Tombow. I don't mind when these flowers or these leaves stick up a little bit. I think it adds a little bit to the project. And I'm going to tuck in between the cording and underneath the flower and put this piece right, tuck it right down in there and press it into place. So I've got still a little piece in there. I'll get that out. There we go. All right, there we go. And I've got the other two pieces still. This little flower, which I think I am going to push right into here. So I'm going to do the same thing. Add a little Tombow to the back of it. And then tuck that into place right underneath here. There we go. Tuck that underneath the flower. There we go. Now we have one last little piece to add, and that's this little, what did I call it, a bud branch? I don't know what to call it. So I'm going to add a little bit of Tombow also on this piece, and I think to balance this out, I need a little something on the bottom here, so I'm going to tuck this little guy in there, and there we have the leaves added to our base. Okay, now for the finishing touches on this, I'm going to take some rhinestones here, and I'm going to take the very largest rhinestone and I'm going to add it to the center of the flower, right there. And push that into place. And then you'll notice that I took some and put them across the top here, 3 of them. Excuse me. And so I'm going to take the next size down and add 3 little rhinestones to the top edge of my project. Again, it's just one of those things that finishes off your piece and adds a nice finishing touch. So there's 2. I want to add one more. One more right about there. Let's see. Need a little work to get straight. There we go. All right. And so there we have the front of our card base pretty well finished. I see a little bit of glue along the bottom here, and I'm just going to erase that, and there we go. All right, so now we're going to get that card base back here, and remember which side actually opens, and I'm going to put this on, center this on here, but I'm going to add some dimensionals on the back of this piece in order to do that. And on this particular piece, I like to put dimensionals in the corners, and then I like to add a couple to the center so that it doesn't sag. And if I'm going to put this much work into a card, I want it to sit up and be supported nicely. So I'll take those pieces off. And then we'll turn this over and see about getting that centered on your card. And what I do is kind of eyeball it a bit and then kind of lay it down gently until I'm pretty sure that it's on there squarely, and then press it into place. And there we have the front of our card base finished. Now, what I've done for the inside of this card, I think I did it on this one as well, I added this large flourish to the inside to give it a little decoration on the inside. I like cards that have been finished appropriately on the inside as well. Let's see, what did I do with that piece of scratch paper right here? So we'll add this flourish to the corner of the card here. And this is one where I think it's a nice touch to add this to the outside of your envelope. So if you have an envelope, and this would be a place to do this. I'm going to take this envelope flap here and put it on my scratch paper, and then ink this flourish up again and add that little detail to the back of our envelope. You could add it to the front as well, but I kind of like it as a nice little surprise on the back of the envelope. So there we have the project for today. And I didn't change up the colors on this one. I really like the color combination on this particular one. And so we have our card with a little decoration on the inside and the same flourish on the envelope. And I think when you take the attention to detail, like the little scoring on here, something on the inside, something on your envelope, it distinguishes your work from others, and gets people to appreciate the amount of effort that you've put in. So that is our project today, and thanks very much for watching my video. And again, all of the products that you've seen here can be purchased on my 24/7 shop, which is lbedinger.stampinup.net. And if you don't have a demonstrator, I'd love to be your demonstrator. And you could always, that's also my blog, go on with any questions and be happy to help you with any questions about this or anything else about Stampin' Up or projects that you're working on. And I'll be back soon with more projects, 3D and more card projects. And I look forward to joining you again soon. Thanks a lot. Bye.